Jonasson, and I had scene 12 from Dr. Strangelove called Friendly Fire. My scene is sort of similar to Nick's in the fact that it didn't have a lot of changing action, but the action in the scene is really important to the movie. It's when the United States Army comes and tries to regain the Air Force base Wilson from General Ripper and his troops. And it's also a relatively short scene as well. So again, not a lot of changing action, but it was basically all like the combat fighting. So first I was testing out some character options. There's a lot of just like generic soldiers in my scene, so I knew I was going to have to duplicate the soldier figure, and at first I was like, well, they're coming in and like attacking them, like eating up everything, so I was like, I kind of like the Pac-Man shape, but I did not go with that. And also I was developing my color choices. So then I was like, what do they look like multiplied and in like clumps? And I pretty much liked this shape, and I added the sash, and then I was going to keep changing the colors depending on if they were with General Ripper's guys or if they were with the United States government. And then I was like, I really want a dark background, so I just changed it to that, and then obviously I was going to have to adapt with the figures. In one of the scenes you see the guy looking through binoculars, and I really liked that aspect. I think it kind of just added some more shape to the scene, not just like your plain old rectangular background. So I tried to make it look like you were seeing what that guy was seeing through his binoculars. So then I just kind of adapted the circles to look more realistic. And this was my idea of adding in like all the U.S. Army coming in and like General Ripper's soldiers like kind of watch them approach and like figure out like what's happening before they start fighting. So these guys represent the United States Army, and then that building was supposed to be kind of like a rough, like you knew that was General Ripper's office, and that little figure is supposed to be General Ripper watching the approach. Then, so I didn't like how my truck looked. It looked very like frontal, kind of like a vent. So I just kind of played around with some shapes, and I liked that a little better. So then I added that, and then kind of fixed my troop arrangement. Well, then I was like, you can't really see most of them, so I added some outlines to make it look more realistic, and then I also added some troops guarding General Ripper's office. So that was my first scene. Oh, and notice General Ripper's guys wear the white sash, and the Army wears the tan-colored sash. So then I was just playing around with some process work for how I was going to develop a better-looking gun and some foliage and leaves for my next scene. So this time I took it still from the perspective of General Ripper's soldiers, but more of like a crouched down, like ready to fight way. So this is supposed to be like you're laying down in the grass from like a far off distance. So then I added a gun and what will be like the bullet thing that holds the bullets when you wear it. And then I just added, again, the Army trucks coming in from a distance, and added some more greenage around. And then actually in the scene they had like some like bushes and other like barrels obstructing them from the Army, so that's what the middle stuff is supposed to be. Then I was like, I really don't like how bright that is, so I changed the background to my third color, which is like a tan brown color. And then I added some so the guys with the white are General Ripper's Army, and so I added them in because they were all like hiding out because they knew this was coming, and then they start attacking the Army. And again, that's General Ripper's office in the distance, which is ultimately where the Army trucks are trying to get to. And that was my second scene. So then I was like, since there wasn't a lot of changing action, for my third scene I took a different approach. And at the end of my scene, there's about like 10 seconds worth of you go into General Ripper's office and you see him with Mandrake, and they're kind of like, they know what's about to happen. General Ripper like doesn't want to admit it, but he's getting really nervous, and he like doesn't want to face like the torture he's about to ensue. So I changed scenes, and now we're going inside, so I had to develop some characters. And I chose to identify them without facial features, but just with hair. Because I thought they both had really distinct haircuts. And of course, Mandrake's mustache was very prominent of his character and General Ripper's cigar, so I wanted to make sure I included those things. And then I chose to make General Ripper's shoulders at that angle because I think it just looked kind of macho, like he's like, hey, like, look at me, I'm more buff than the rest of you. And then Mandrake is just kind of more your average looking guy. So I tried to stick with more like normal shoulder shape. So then I continued with the tan colored background because I wanted to appear like kind of dark because they're kind of hiding out in this room. And I thought white was a little too harsh. So I initially set it up with, in the actual scene, they're both sitting on the couch, but I didn't really want to do that directly. So there's a couch and a table in the scene, and General Ripper and Mandrake are kind of conversing. Again, I don't get a lot of dialogue in my scene, but basically they're kind of evaluating what their next step is, and they know that eventually these army guys are going to come in and invade them, and their whole goal is to kind of dismantle Ripper's plan because they see him as a great threat to the United States. So then I changed the background color of the window because I wanted it to look more realistic. It'd be like brighter outside than it is indoors. And it still didn't really look realistic, kind of just. So I added some, what would be like bullet holes or like battle wounds in the building. And I added a gun to General Ripper because, again, he feels threatened and he feels like he's going to have to like protect himself. Whereas I feel like Mandrake wasn't like ready to fight. He was more like trying to convince Ripper to like calm down and give him the code kind of thing. And I then added just some other features of a room to make it more realistic. Added a bookshelf and some papers. Oh, and that was the end of that scene. And I tried to depict like a few of General Ripper's guys up closer in the window, and there's some friendly fire going on in the background of the bullets. So that was my first scene, second scene, and third scene.
That's okay, just pull it down a little bit.
Anyone have questions? Yeah.
I really like the perspectives you used in your first and second scenes because it makes us as the audience seem like we're part of the scene instead of just an outsider looking in on the scene, so that's cool.
Yeah, I kind of tried to, because the scene could be portrayed pretty like the same each time because it's all pretty much outside in front of the Air Force Base, so thank you. Sarah?
Your first scene, this office was just sitting in the road.
Yeah, I kind of wanted it to be like there was a road coming from behind it, and then there was also a road like getting up to the front door. And I think I depicted that better in the second scene. So, yeah.
In your third scene, maybe you could add like glass on the floor, like from like the windows, because it looks like they're not really being affected inside.
Yeah, I think you're looking for some detail there when you put the books and papers in, but the one piece of detail I think we do need there is maybe some litter on the floor because the glass has broken. In that scene, there's a little technical issue in terms of those ends for the curtains blending into the hair. It's kind of like photobombing it to a certain extent and changing their shape. And I think you need to do something about it. It may be nothing more than narrowing the window, a hair on either side and cutting down on the sides of the curtain or something. But we don't really want their hair conjoined with the curtains and things.
Yeah,
Because it does funny things to the way you look
shift
at
it
it.
all a little bit.
And it looks, it's more obvious when you see it in the smaller view here. It doesn't bother you, I think, as much when it's blown up. But it still was enough to distract the eye. Some other questions and comments? Come on.
Mark?
This is a really small detail, but in the second scene, the the bullets, I think they'd have like more pointed tips.
Okay.
That's just really small.
I really like the color choices that you made because it goes really well with the army theme specifically.
That's kind of I initially just chose the green because it reminded me of like armies.
You did a good job of getting, it'd be so easy to get them just too close, and you did a good job of making them distinct enough that they still hold up in projection. That's very good.
Yeah.
Do you think the word army on the side of the truck is a necessary detail?
I was kind of playing around with that myself. I guess it's probably not necessary.
I think if you would put the appropriate color band, just a line, a thick line in that, so that it would identify it as matching the soldiers of the one side, you would actually be better off there than having the word. Technically, the words, you're not supposed to use words anyway, but I don't think it's helping in that. Because we know that it's an Air Force base and the Army is what's coming in. And other than branding it to match a certain group of soldiers, I don't really see any reason to have any written in the truck.
One thing I had difficulty with was your second scene, the foreground stuff. Is the gun on the bottom right being held? If so, where from? And the magazine or the belt or whatever, at first, it looked like it was a strange continuation of the road.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a way to differentiate those, I think that would be to your advantage.
Okay, yeah, I kind of wanted it to be from like the perspective of you were the soldier, kind of like hiding out there.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe have like the gun propped up in front of you or like bouncing on your shoulder. My goal wasn't to make it like completely realistic, just like just give you the feel that like I think I was actually basing it off of a specific scene within my scene. Like there's like a larger gun and then you are from the perspective of the person with the gun looking onto the field, and I just added the bullet things.
Okay.
Yeah, Rob?
In that second scene, I was going to make a comment on that. Maybe if you showed the barrel of the gun coming out, a bit of it coming out the center to give that perspective of that you're sitting behind the gun.
So like tilt it a little bit.
Well, just, you could just
Yeah.
have it sticking out a little bit, almost like you're sitting behind the gun, taking aim at those trucks, something like that. I like the way that you changed the color of the sash, or it would be called a bandolier on a soldier. But it's a good way to differentiate.
Just one thing I would like you to do, the shapes of the hair are correct, but they look rather drawn. They've been smoothed out a little bit more than just shapes. And if you could constrict them a little more to using, say, a parallelogram or several shapes welded together more obviously, I think that would work. And indeed, if you did that from the very beginning, you could show that in the character development, but I suspect these are a little more drawn, a little more free.
Yeah, I like just like curved a bunch of points in like a square shape.
Yeah, and I think they need to be just a little more geometric, particularly mandrake, I think would be easy enough to do. And I like the idea that we would change that, the suggestion Rob made, I think is really good there. And then that little bit on the truck. But overall, these are really lovely scenes. They're really designed well. I think you did a really brilliant use of color there and a nice presentation throughout.
Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, Abby.
Going off of what Rob said for the suggestions, just in case, like, if you just show the barrel of the gun or something, in case that doesn't, if that isn't exactly clear that it's a gun, you can always, like, do the sighting as well for the gun, like the person who's looking at the sighting.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Anyone else?